have a single workshop to just look at the Excel itself, kind of mimicking what Codecademy is doing, but what I'll provide is a lot more high-level actionable pieces on that, right? Cool. So I think everybody was able to create the road accidents data set, right? This is kind of what we named it. And we agreed you would actually put it inside of your data folder, correct? I remember Esther may have been having some issues there, but I believe Irene and Dennis, you all have helped Esther by now, correct or correct?
Correct.
Okay, good deal. Right. So let's make a reference here. So I said here, obtain, read the data, right? And we understand the idea of variables, right, in Python, right? So we have a variable here called data path, and we provide and as we assign this value to that. So this is an assignment element here, right? So we've assigned the value, and the value is actually a path. It's a file path. And in one of our classes, we're going to deal with how Python actually handles file paths and file system object. We can deal with that later on. For this class, remember, you're learning Python just for data analysis, right? You're not learning Python for programming, for the full programming end, but just for data analysis. So therefore, our approach is very, very niche, right? Cool. So what's important to know here is that you're referring to a file path. So you're providing the primary file path and then the sub path within that file path. What does that mean? If you look into data folder, inside data folder, you have a file named Road Accidents in Kenya 2024, correct?
Sure.
Good. Then we're invoking another variable, df. We're calling it df for data frame. Universally, most of the times you're going to encounter it as such. And we're saying we're starting to use certain classes and objects, right, in Python. Because remember, we said Python is full of libraries, right? And in our instance, we've imported the pandas library, and we've abbreviated that as a PD, right? When we use this word pandas as PD, what in SQL language, what do we refer to this as thing? Dennis?
Alias.
Alias, right? It's an alias. It's an alias, an alias, however you pronounce it, it's the same thing, right? It's an alias that basically says this pandas library is interchangeably called PD, because that's what we've named it. You could call it anything. You could call it elephant. It doesn't matter as long as you consistently use that alias from that point on. Universally, it is kind of common practice to be referred to as PD. Okay. So I'm going to run that. It imports my libraries. Let me just set that. I get the green check. And then I'm going to try to read this here. If everything is aligned well, I'll get a reading. If something is wrong, I'm going to get an error. Errors are good for us, right? Because they point us in the direction of what we need to see. Correct or correct?
Sure.
Yeah, so we're not running away from those errors, right? We're actually looking in to see, hey, what's going on there? So I want you to actually be running the same thing. And I believe everybody has this in line. So you're writing code as we go along, right? And I do get my check mark, meaning that it actually found the document and actually read it in. It took a little longer. That's 33 seconds, 33.2 seconds, which is a little longer than usual, right? Cool. So what do we do from here? We want to kind of see, we want to kind of inspect what we have just brought in as our data set, right? Right? So let's take a look here. So next thing we're going to do here is let's do an inspection, a quick inspection. Let's inspect the data set that we just brought in. And Dennis, what is this that I'm writing here?
A comment.
A comment. It's just for your own personal consumption. It kind of just keeps you in check, kind of know what it is you're doing. And that's why we have this thing called notepads, right? It's literally a notepad. Think of it as a scribble book, right? So I'm just doing that, and all I'm saying down here, I want to see a little bit of this data that I brought in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the head of the data, read. So what I'll do here, let me just take this back, is I'm going to actually, use a markdown, and I'm going to say inspect the head. And I'm going to use this capital letters here. You'll understand what I'm doing in a minute. I'm going to use 4 of them. I'm going to precede this with 4 of them. And you do know what that means, right? This is my markdown, right? So my markdown is always going to be different from my actual code. So there we go. So we're going to go ahead and inspect the markdown, right? The kind of like the head. So let's change this one to code. And then I'm going to look at the data set that we brought in earlier. So df, which is our data set. I'm going to do dot head. You remember how we were doing this before at some point? Right? Same thing. I just did dot head. Right? Because some of you all, when you brought in your data set, you don't have road. You have unlabeled something. Correct or correct?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is so? Because I deliberately went in and labeled this column on my Excel sheet. For you guys, you don't have a label here. It's kind of blank. Correct or correct? On the Excel sheet. So
And
what you do, right? Yeah. If you didn't label it, right? I'm going to show you how to do it programmatically. And I'm also going to show you how to do it manually. You can go back to your Excel sheet and just put a label on that column. Did I lose anybody? I want to make sure we're together. Right? Again, what we've done is we're reading the head of that, kind of like the first 5 rows in that data set. The head method, so data frame, that's the object we created, as you all already know. The dot head basically helps us read the first 5 rows by default. In the brackets, you can assign how many rows you want to see initially. Okay. By default, it's going to give you 5. I can say, just show me the first 2. And look at that. I'm only showing the first 2 rows. Do you see that difference there? Yeah. I want to hear some yeses, some head nods, north and south, right? Please unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself, right? So I can get some feedback here, because I don't want to leave anybody behind. Okay. So basically, the implementation of the head method allows us to decide how many objects, how many rows we want to see from the top of our records. Okay. By default, if you don't pass anything, you just call the method itself, you're going to return first 5 rows. Okay. If you pass a value there, you're going to see that. Sometimes I pass just 1, because all I need to do is just to see the inspection of the head is just to tell me what the table headers are, kind of look at the structure of the data. Is something missing? Some obvious things like we did learn from week 1, right? Yeah. At the same time, I can look at, let me just look at this here, say 4. And I'm going to say inspect the tail. Okay. The tail is going to be the very end of the document. Tail. Okay. The last columns, the last rows. Okay. The reason is a lot of times we're dealing with very large data sets, right? And if you're to read the whole thing all at once, understand that we in data analysis, majority of our functions happen in memory. Therefore, we want to be able to conserve as much memory as possible for critical things, right? Imagine you had a data set that has 20 million rows, and you brought all of that, dumped it into your memory. Your memory is chock full, so your processes can start to get slower. Also, another reason why we do this is a lot of times when we want to write products on objects on this, we want to do it on a subset which is going to process quickly. So we're not sitting here waiting for 20 million rows to process, right? When we just want to shape it, we can do the actual shaping, and then once we have it all refined, we can apply it to the larger data set. And I'll show you guys how that works. Okay. So it helps for you to just eyeball it. Angalia tu mara moja ujue, hapo mbele juu hii data vile nimeangalia kuna vitu zina miss hapa. Nikiangalia huko chini, hebu niangalie huko hizo rows za mwisho zinakaaje. Hebu niangalie hizo rows za huko mbele za juu zinakaaje, na kupatia you make your judgment very quickly, right? You make your assessment very quickly. So let's look at the tail. Same thing as before. This is just a header. I'm using Visual Studio Notebook, which is slightly different, but the same thing as what you all are having on your notebook and Jupyter notebooks, right? So let's do code here, and I want to do df dot tail. Again, dot tail by default is going to give me the last 5 items. Okay. So if I want just the last 2, I want to get the last 2 rows, and I also want to get just the first 2 rows. I'll get the first top 2, and I get the last 2. Quick checkpoint here to make sure that everybody is with me for Esther and Dennis. Remember that when you brought in your data set, there's a high likelihood that your data set is showing this heading here on the index lem as unlabeled. And the way to remedy that is to go back to your Excel sheet, the one that you're creating using you're creating a synthetic data set, and put a label on that column because it's empty at the moment.
Yeah.
Then save it and then close the Excel sheet. Then come back and rerun your Python code. Everybody understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you do that, now it's going to give it a name. But we're going to do some cool things now. Okay. Having seen all this, I want to look at the columns. So, I'm going to show you. I want to do how to access the column headings. Okay. So let's call this one. Again, I'm just creating headers with a markdown here, guys. We've already learned this. For those of you who are kind of new, kind of joining us now to see how this works, again, these guys are kind of in an advanced class, advanced stage. Regan Ojuang, very nice to see you. These students are in a much advanced stage of their learning. So this is not the first class that they're having. So therefore, you're witnessing them in action at a more advanced stage. Part of the reason why I invited you in here so that you can get a sense and a feeling of what this looks like in real life. Cool. All right. And Vanessa is one of our moderators, is our lead moderator, is our only moderator, administrator on the ground. Again, she doesn't have to be here at all. I mean, she's just here for moral support. Vanessa, by all means, do not feel obligated to be around. I don't want to mess your sleep. All right, cool. All right, so let's look at this. How to access the column headings. Okay, I'm going to turn this into a markdown, and then that changes things. And then I'm going to now write code. How to access the column headings. What do I mean by column headings? Esther, what are column headings here?
January.
Exactly.
February.
Exactly. So how do we access those? How to access that top level there? We're going to use something called, we're going to refer to our object again, which is df, which is a data frame. Then you just do dot columns. So dot columns is going to return a list of elements, the elements that constitute the heading of the data frame object. Do you all see that?
Yeah.
It refers to them as indices, and you guys understand that here as we advance, right? But inside this index, it's actually keeping a list-like object. As you can see, it refers to it as an object, and it actually lists them inside the list object with the, you can see the opening brace, the opening square bracket, and the closing square bracket, denoting what type of data structure is that, Esther?
Sorry?
What type of data structure is this here? It begins with an opening bracket, square bracket, and a closing square bracket. What type of data structure is this?
It's a list.
It's a list, exactly. Yeah. So now we have basically returned a list of the headings or the columns that we have. So a lot of times this looks kind of ugly because you have a lot of things going on here. Can I just return a list itself? To do so, I usually just put this in a list. I usually just span it all of this into a list. And when I do that, I actually get my list in a much more neat manner. Do you all see the difference?
Yeah.
It's almost immediate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just taken away the noise that was there to just be able to deal with the item, the column headings themselves, right? Yeah. Now we are back to our list, and we know we can do a lot of things with a list object, right? As we already know, right? Yeah. For example, we can change them, we can rename them, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can say here that calls, I'm going to call calls is equal to list. Do you see what I just did there? I've created a new variable. I'm calling it calls, and I'm assigning it a list of items. Make sense? That way, I can now print my calls. I get the same thing. So Dennis, do you see how I've talked about the same thing, but in increasing layers of, shall I call it nimbleness? Like I'm just shifting the same thing again and again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And why I do that is to also help you cement the understanding of what we're doing. We can shift the same thing, right? Yeah. So at a very global level, it was very noisy. Then I start to massage it, maneuver it, and then eventually I have this elegant display of exactly what's going on. And if I'm here, I'm back to exactly where we were last week. Lists. What can I do with lists? What are some of the things I can do with lists? Let's name them, Dennis. I can. One, maybe. What are some of the things I can do to a list? A list is a collection. What are some of the things I can do to a collection? Maybe you want Esther to start you off?
You can remove things, you can add things.
And add things, yes. Yeah. I've just opened a whole universe of operations, right? But they're specific to this data structure at hand, which is what? What kind of data structure is that? Dennis?
Sorry?
What kind of data structure is that?
A list.
A list. Exactly. Right? Yeah. So all of the operations that we had before can now take effect, right? But remember, we're just trying to retrieve the column headings, right? So for example, I want to change the first column heading here. So the first column here is called, I named it road, right? Okay. I want to change this from road, and I want to give it a different name. Okay. So what would I do here? I'll say, let's say this. Change the road label, because it's a label, to, let's call it something else. Yeah? What shall we call it? Let's just call it a Swahili word, barabara, right? Barabara, right? So we can do that. How do we do this? We now go back to what we're doing before, because I already have calls, right? Remember, I now refer to it as calls. I can now say, hey, calls, and I refer to the position. What's the position of road? Esther? What position is road in terms of indexes?
0.
Position 0. Perfect. So position 0, which means, like if I run this, it's going to return road, right? I can assign it. I can change its value. So I'm saying on position 0, which is road, change it to what? Barabara. So I'm going to assign it a new name, barabara. Okay. Right. So calls 0 is this. So now if I print calls, or if I call calls, what happens? Do you see that? You just see what happened?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we emphasize in this class right, as part of the practice that you go on your own, is this idea of typing, right? Because if you can type without having to worry, oh my God, where is T? Where is F? You can free your mind for the logical reasoning that's required to understand the problem at hand. When I asked you guys to do a little bit of practice on typing early on, maybe you're wondering, "Huyu jamaa anachukulia fala, si ndio?" No, I was preparing you for this scenario here, where I wanted you to free your mind to reason and be logical, because coding is all about logic. And if all of your capacity and attention is struggling to find where X, M, N is, we've got a problem. Yeah? You can't even follow what I'm doing quick enough. So therefore, Regan or Juang, if you're here, assuming that perhaps you've not done this before, perhaps you've done this, good for you. If you have not, you might actually consider learning how to type. Okay? Cool. All right, so that's what we've done, guys. What have we done here? We've renamed the first label on our headers, which is road, and we've been able to rename that to Barabara. But how did we have to do that? We first of all changed it into a list object from a data frame object. Do you see this idea of shape shifting, this origami thing that I've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
That now we've been able to access that first item and actually change it. Okay, so how do I now look back at my data frame? So I do df.head. If I just call df.head, yeah, can I just see what's there with first two? I still have it as road. So something hasn't happened, right? Yeah, I haven't really assigned that value here. All I have done is created column values, but now I have to set the columns to the new names. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say, so that's number 5, how to access column headings. Number 6 is going to be how to assign new column labels. You've all seen how I accessed a little bit of a thing and I kind of changed. Now I want to assign those to the column so that we have a new set. So how do we do that? I want to turn this into Markdown. And then now I can write code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say df.calls. Columns is equal to calls. Because remember, calls is now what? Is now this here. Do you see that? So I first have to go and change the calls and then come back and then assign them, right? Yeah. If you're Irene, you're probably wondering, dude, you're splitting hairs here with these guys. Like you're explaining very small little details here. But these things matter, right? Especially for beginners, because they're going to struggle like, okay, how do I change this column, right, Irene? Do you see a lot of that? Right?
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree, Irene?
I agree.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you're getting now is you have power to be able to change anything within the data frame. Remember, our focus is just on the data frame. That we want to be so good at the table, which we have framed, but now we want to access each element of the frame object and be able to have power over it, to be able to manipulate it, to be able to change it, to be able to add things to it. Right, Dennis? That's the essence of what we're doing. Okay. So now, after doing this, I'm doing that. Let's go ahead and run that. Now, if I were to look at, df.head fresh, remember here, whenever I tried to run it, I did not get anything meaningful. I wound up with something else. And if I run this and actually look at the first two or even whichever number, you'll see that actually now it has that as Barabara. You'll see that? And over here we have it as road. So I was able to change a column name. And you can do that with any of this, but it doesn't make sense for us to change this because we want them to be what? To be months of a year. Okay. Dennis Mwangi, very good to see you, sir. This presentation is being recorded. You're watching a live class that's going on. I invited you guys here to kind of have a window, a snippet into what our classes look like so that you can judge and gauge for yourself if this is a good fit for you. In this class, we take people who are willing and who want to learn. This is a very boring class. There's no singing, no twerking, nothing. There's no mshane. It's just dry stuff. So it's not for everybody. This here is your opportunity to take a look and ask yourself, do I really want to sit through this in the morning? Okay. It's okay if you don't join us. And that's where we invite you for free to see what's going on and make an assessment for yourself. Cool. All right. So these guys are in advanced classes. So again, this is, since I invited you guys, you all can't ask questions really, because this is their class that they paid for and they're attending. So we're going to respect that, but at least get a window into what we do. Okay. Cool. All right. So guys, what have we done? We have been able to ask. We started by creating a data frame. We created some synthetic data, right? You know how we generated that. We went ahead and now started to look at the data frame object, the head, the tail of that object. We went into actually looking at how to change the column names on that data set, right? And so now you know how to assign new label to the column head. So now what we're going to do is some of the things that we were learning last week, right? Okay. We're going to start to access things. So what I want to do now is I want to do is, let's just call this one here, number 7, how to access a single row in the table. Yeah, there's so many ways, right? Some of which I've already shown you. Okay. There's so many ways to do this. This one is going to be a very interesting one. Okay. And then after we do that, we're going to deal with how, sorry. We're going to do our number 8. It's going to be how to access a single column. Single or multiple columns. Single, multiple rows. Single, multiple columns. I'm going to take you through all of this here shortly. Okay. Let's put that here. This is a markdown. For the students that are here, you will understand what that is. Using markdown language. So let's get started. How to access a single or multiple columns in the table. Remember, our table is just a DF, it's just a data frame. If I run that, it shows me my entire table with 5 rows. Unfortunately, for our synthetic data, we only went up to 5. You could make it a little longer than that. I think we'll do that in our next example, right? So what we want to do is we want to return the first row, the second row, or the third row, the fourth, or just one of the rows here. Okay. Yeah. How do we do this? Okay. I want to challenge Dennis and Esther. I know they're not going to like me for this. Not as much, right? But it's a good opportunity, right? Because we went through some of these ones in our AKA introductory stage, where we were not actually working with data set that we created, right? Yeah, you all do that? Yeah. So again, this is a safe space for us to fail, okay? And here, for those of you like Dennis Mwangi, these guys have to participate. It's a hands-on class. It's an applied thing where we actually do things. So one of them is going to share their screen and it's going to talk us through how to get some of these things done. Okay. Because I know we theorized about this. We hadn't done it in practice, but now we're going to do that. And Dennis, I don't expect a correct answer. Esther, I don't expect a correct answer. We reward the logic, the thinking through is where the solution's at. Right? Cool.
Yeah.
So Dennis, you'll take the number 7 and Esther will take number 8. And we're going to correct each other. We're going to get this done. Okay.
Yeah.
There's certain key words or key methods that I'm looking for, right? That we covered part of last week or the week before. Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to stop there and then I'll resume once you've demonstrated. And I'm going to have Dennis share his screen and kind of help us retrieve a single row, which we will say, hey, let us just return to us row number 3. I just want this one here, for example. Okay. Or row number 2, which has Langata Road and all of the data set that's there. Okay. Or row number 2 and 3. Okay. And then Esther is going to show us how to return just one column. For example, I just want a column that has the roads, barabara, this one here, or this one and this one, whichever columns I want. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, Janice, over to you. I'll stop sharing. New share screen.
Yeah, I think my screen is also visible. Yeah. Yeah, so how to access single multiple rows. So my first choice is to access a single row. And in this case, I'm choosing the last row. The last row in my case would be this one named number 4. Yeah, so I want to return all the values starting with the 4 would be visible and everything that is on the last row. So to access that, we use the data frame, and then because the Python is a zero indexed language. Yeah, so row number one, the first row, which is 0. For us, when we are naming the rows, we start by 0. We go to 1, 2, 3, 4. It is not like the normal naming system where we start with 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so in this case, I'm returning the last row. To do that, I can, in our case from our learning from last week, yeah, the last row can be returned by a -1. So the last item in any list that you are given, it can be returned by using a -1. So if I use a -1, and yeah, that would mean I'm taking the very last item or the last row, starting from the last row to the last row. So in that case, I would return only the last row. And calling that, it has already given me the result. So I would as well go ahead to access multiple rows. Yeah, so calling multiple rows would also, let me back to
Good job.
Let me call that first, because I want to see. Yeah, calling a multiple rows, I'll need, maybe I can select from first row maybe to the second, the third, and so forth. So in this case would be, I'm interested, let me return the second row, which is at position 1, to the 4th row, the 5th row, which is at position 4. So in that case, I would be interested in position 1 up to this level. So if I'm returning from 1 to 4, I'll return 1, 2, and 3. So the 4 is not going to be included. In that case, I would have 1. And then I start with the very first row that I'm interested in. And because I'm interested up to the 4th row, which is at position 3, and I have to write 4. And then I would as well call that, and I would return 3 rows.
Perfect. Perfect, man. That is perfection right there. That is perfect work. Good job. Amazing, right? Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. And so this also helps you, Dennis, to affirm what you already know, and helps you build confidence, kind of helps you to present material Good job. I couldn't add anything or take away from what you did. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Right? Yeah. Let's hand it over to Esther. And Esther is going to show us how to access single column or multiple columns. And when you access columns, it could be the first column, it could be January. Let's say, for example, I want to return February and October, November records, right? Rainfall records. Okay. So let's start with just returning the January records. And then after that, I want you to return January, October, and November. Good stuff, guys. Now, Arin, I want to confirm, just make sure that we don't take too much of your time as well, okay? Especially when I'm covering it, so that you get sleep, so you're not waking up with these guys all the time, right? Unless I know you enjoy it, right? So I want to make sure that you're not hurting in any way, okay? Yeah. You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember your camera. Okay. All right. Cool. And so again, one of the things that we try to emphasize here is this idea that analysts will speak. Believe it or not, you will speak. The reason you speak is you are a researcher. So you inquire about data and then you have to present it. So you have to speak. So Esther will speak with us and tell us what she's doing as you go along. Esther, you're going to want to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'll deal with number 8, how to access a single multiple columns in a table. Okay, first I'll call the data frame dt.head, where it will select the first 5 rows. Okay, I want to choose the first, let's say the first column, which is January. I'll do dt dot column, then into brackets, I'll call that column by name.
Yeah. We're going to help each other as we go along, right? So you are on the right track, Esther. Only thing to change is, so this time around, you just don't want the column label. So when you do dot column, it's only effective at the column label, the labels themselves, right? The titles. But to get the column content, you don't call the column method again. You just you do the same thing, but just change the column to df. So where you have line 24, change that to df, and then just call the column name. Okay. So you're almost there, and know it's a little. Okay. So what exactly do we need to do? Again, just type df, and then into square bracket, you're going to call the name itself. So remove delete column, and then change the bracket from those brackets to our usual slice brackets.
Sorry?
So just change the brackets to the way we normally refer to them. They're usually square brackets. Remember the square brackets?
Yes.
Yeah, they're kind of like how Dennis was referring to object. And then run that and see what happens. This is what you wanted to see, right? And that's totally okay, guys. Yeah, I made the same thing over and over because my mind is trying to struggle between, okay, which one is it? Which one is it, right? That's totally fine, right? So now, Esther, you see the distinction there, right? So when you use the dot column, it's just returning the labels themselves, the titles. It's not going to return the content of. To return the content, we need to slice it. It's called slicing. Why is it a slice? Because I'm not looking at the entire data frame. I'm looking at a slice of it, just the slice that has the January records. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So if you are going to look at multiple columns, guess what you're going to do? You're going to provide a list, because right, you see, you only provided one item there, right? DF, and then you provided Jan. So now if you're going to look at multiple columns, you're going to provide a list of columns, right? So you're going to say DF, right? And then you're going to get your brackets again, opening and closing bracket. Just open the bracket and close it. No. We don't use that. So it's the other one, because we are slicing, right? So it's not this bracket, it's the slicing bracket, which is the square, kind of like list like, yeah. Close it, open it, and close it. You open it, and then you put the closing one. No. So just the square brackets, remove all those. There's no other brackets inside there, okay? We only deal with the slicing brackets. Is that clear, Esther?
Yes.
Yeah. Because why? Because we're slicing, okay? But now, instead of saying just January, we want to be able to pass all of the ones that we need, right? And every time we're passing a list of items, we put them into a list, right? So in there, create now a list that has January, October, and November. So how do we create a list? We open the bracket again. We open the bracket, okay? Again, we don't use those brackets, we use the slice bracket, right? Yeah, and then in there now you pass January, then you pass October, then you pass November. So basically you're passing a list of items that you want to, columns that you want to call. Perfect. Does that make sense? And this is the learning that we're doing, right? Practically, right? So the distinction we've seen here is when to use the dot column, and also when to use multiple column labels, which has to be inside of a list. So use, yeah, you can pass those January and February and March, that's fine. I wanted you to pass January, October, and November. Okay. Dennis, I want you to see what she's doing, and I want you to make the correction that's needed there.
Yeah.
Just let her type first, because I know you can see the correction that needs to be there, right? Okay. So Esther, can you try to fix that?
Yes.
You got it. Okay, run that. Voila. That's it, right? What's the other big lesson that we're learning here? It's the painful attention to detail.
Yeah.
You put in a comma at the wrong place, doesn't work. You put in the wrong type of bracket, doesn't work. We tend to use the traditional brackets when we're referring to methods. We tend to use the square brackets when we're slicing things. A slice is a part of a whole. Okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I wanted to say for the first case, Esther is through. Esther, you done?
Yes, I'm done.
So I wanted to say that we can as well use another method to access the single and the multiple columns. Maybe for the single column, we could as well use maybe df dot the column name, like Jan. Yeah.
You can use the dot notation to refer to it, because Python is an extremely object-oriented language. And you guys remember our class that we had some time earlier on when I explained this idea of objects, right? It was a really robust class. You remember that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So all of those are approaches that you can use. When you're beginning, pick one and stick to it. Okay. So Esther, you've seen how to access one single object column and how to access multiple columns, right? Do this every day for the time being. As your knowledge and skills expand, now you can be more, can have the flair to stretch yourself, to extend yourself a little bit. But for you to cement the knowledge in your head, stick to one method first. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Cool. Right. All right. Cool. I'm gonna take it back, guys, and then we're gonna draw a line so that we can come to a conclusion. I know I did take you guys a little longer than usual. We should be done. I'm gonna take just 5 minutes. I'm gonna show you some other things here real quick, and then we're gonna wrap this class, okay? All right. Thank you very much. Good job, everybody. Good learning. So let me share my screen and kind of drive this home for us. Touch screen. Guys, I wear these dark shades here because I'm always on a computer. These have a green blue light deflecting. So for those of you who are new, Dennis, don't think that I'm hiding behind these glasses, right? No, this is just for my eyes. Cool. So what did we do here, guys? We said, okay, that -1 would give us the last column, right? And we have this idea of start and stop. We put a column and kind of slice through this. We've talked about this before. You all understand that. I'm not going to repeat that any further. Then we also shown that we can use the same idea of brackets just like that. And this will return everything. So sorry, let me just go back there, turn this into a card. And then I'm going to run that. And I don't have anything in there. So I'm not passing any value. So if I did Jan, now I should be able to get something, right? I get January. Sure. Then we said, okay, I want to pass a list of months. So I can have something like month to show is equal to, I'm going to pass a list of names that I want. Jan, okay, October, November. So Esther, this is just another way to reason, to think about it logically, sequentially, right? That I have a list of values that I want to look at, right? I have a list of months, right? So therefore, if I go to my data frame now, then I have my standard slice because that's how I show things, but I pass the name of the months that I want to show, right? It's the same thing. Yeah. Do you realize how nuanced these things are, Esther? In the previous case, we passed those values directly into it, but I could also separate them, put them on their own, just for purposes of understanding, right? Yeah. If this helps in some capacity, I like breaking things, chunking things down in order to support you further, to support, kind of help you understanding, right? So around that, I get, oh, sorry, I didn't need to make this code. I think I had as a markdown. So now let's run that. I get the same thing, the same output. Simona hiyo establishment imekuwa.
Yes.
Yeah, so ni ile kitu ya kwanza ni the same thing, lakini we've just chunked it down a little bit. Okay. Okay. So. All right, guys. So that's what we've done now, right? So our data frame still exists, right? So our data frame again always looks like this. I can do some things here. This is going to be a bonus review here because we've done this. I can use the df dot iloc, right? You remember this one? And the .iloc method was really, really nimble because it's helping us to access things as well, right? So how did we use .iloc? Yeah, because I use .iloc to be able to say I want to return these values here. So let's say I want to return. Let's say I want to return these values here. That's very different from returning the entire row, right? I can get something ad hoc. The iloc index position helps us to return just the values we need. Maybe all I need is this here, right? Yeah, that's a very unique ask. I'm not just asking for May, June, July, but I'm asking for May, June, July for Langata Road and Namanga. So the question would be, what were the accident numbers for the months of May, June, July for Langata, Tangata, and Namanga roads? You see how that is? It's actually a real world situation, Dennis. Do you see that?
Yeah.
It is. So what are we asking? For Namanga, I'm going to look at our table here. For Namanga and Langata, Namanga is here. Then I will look under May, June, July. So basically I'm saying I want these values here. May, June, July. Sorry. May, June, July. These values here. Right? Yeah. That's a tricky one. You can't access that using the methods we've seen so far. None of those will help you. You need
Yeah.
something else, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's where this comes into play, the iloc. Because now with the iloc, I can do what? Okay. df.iloc, does it take a square bracket or does it take a method? Is it a method?
Square.
Square, right?
Yeah.
Because why? Because then I'm going to be able to pass, yeah? Because iloc takes both, it takes pairs, right? The pairs of always start with rows and columns, right? So the first column, start of rows, end of rows, start of columns, end of columns. That will give us exactly what we're looking for.
Sure.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Hiki tumeanza kuingia, si ndio?
Mm.
Right? Yeah. So how do we do that? We do know that in terms of our it's always rows and columns first, by the way, rows and columns, not columns and rows. So in terms of rows, we're looking at Langata and Nambanga. So what rows are we looking at? Row number 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
That's where our answer lies, right? So Langata, Nambanga. For us to return these rows, I need to start from index number 2, because that's where it's starting from. Index number 2, but it ends at index number 3. Therefore, Python wants me to add the last number plus 1 to get the tail, so 4. Okay?
Yeah.
I can find this alone in itself, and it's going to return to me just those rows. Can you see it's already returned to me just Langata and Namanga?
Yeah.
Yeah. And every time you write this, don't wait to write the whole thing. Write a little bit of it and make sure you are in the ballpark of what you need. So I know now for sure I'm in this area, but I don't need the entire thing. Now I want to add just these ones here. So in other words, I just want to add these ones here. Actually, it's May, June, July. So I want to add just these ones here. But I'm already in the correct format, which is, so I just need to return these ones here. Okay. So that's going to be on my column. So on my column, where do I start from? I'm starting on May. So May is what column number? I start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that correct?
Sure.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. May is my 5th column, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I start with 5, okay, and what's my end? Which column do I want? I want to end July, right? Yeah. So if this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So July is going to be my 7th, right?
No. 8.
There's nothing.
8.
8.
So I'm going to put 8 here because it's Python, because the last one always has to be 1 plus, right? For me to be able to get the end piece there. It's a very nuanced understanding, guys. So that's why we have to do it practically to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Esa na Dennis, mona hiyo hata ukijaribu peke yako sio kuna realize, hey, I need to actually add 1 to get this, right? So
Sure.
if I do 8, now let me run that and see what happens. Voila. Oh my God. Look at that. Understand that all of the methods that we learned earlier could never give us that level of slicing. There's nothing we could do but use the iloc method to get that result. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop the class there. Thank you so much for your participation and attendance. What we have learned in a nutshell, if I may recap, is we created a synthetic data set. We first of all imported the critical libraries that we need for pandas data frames, right? Which is pandas for data frames. We haven't used NumPy at all today. We're going to use this in future class. What we've done is we've had a review of how to bring in a data set to read it. We defined a path parameter as a variable. Then we used pd.read_csv because our product is actually a CSV file. After that, we went over inspection of the data set. Where do we inspect? Remember, we created a perfect data set. There were no missing records, no missing values. It was perfect record. But we do know in future, once we start going to Kaggle to bring our data sets, that there's going to be a lot of noisiness, messiness, missingness. You all remember all those keywords, right? In our case, we're using a textbook example, which is perfect. So we were able to bring in our data set and we looked at the head using this head method. We use that the tail using the tail method, and we applied. We said we just need the last 2 rows. Then we started to look at the heading columns, and we were able to access the columns, and we were able to change our column name, right? After that, we assigned new column names to our data set. And then we started to access single or multiple columns and rows. And that, my friends, is all you need to do 90 to 100% of all of your manipulations in terms of accessing, navigating a data frame. Remember, we're not doing any combinations or permutations so far. We're just navigating the data frame. Because when you have the freedom of navigation, now you can do anything with it. Thus marks the end of our class today. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Thank you.